Hello all, I'm Kel Kidman. Welcome to Breaking on the Daily, and happy Halloween to everyone. It's October 30th, and, Halloween's tomorrow. That's gonna be fun for those of you who have the ability to trick-or-treat. For everyone else, and, party and that sort of thing. For everyone else, have fun doing nothing and just standing around in a costume all day, being uncomfortable. That's sad. Anyway, on to our first story. Some more revelations in the Hunter Biden story, as if there's anything else going on. The FBI has now confirmed it's investigating Hunter Biden, and has been since 2019. Man, ain't this fun. So, it ends up... So, I think this more than helps my conclusion that I have made in previous videos, that the whole impeachment thing, and the reason this stuff didn't come out, it pretty much, this whole thing vindicates Trump from impeachment earlier this year. Because now it's clear that the FBI not only had the information with regard to the laptop and such, and Trump obviously knew about it, but we know not only that, but that they were investigating this information. So asking Ukraine to go and do an investigation is obviously not out of line. We have come to that point. It's amazing. It has vindicated Trump almost entirely, except I would say one thing. This is clearly dirty politics. Because if this weren't dirty politics, well, we would have gotten a lot more of this information back in January, back in, December, and those sorts of months where this controversy was going on. But it's pretty clear this is when they planned on announcing it. But this is all looking really bad. The reason being is that they're not looking into the lewd stuff, the porn and all that. No, they're looking into corruption with regard to Ukraine and with regard to China, all the money laundering, because it's a money laundering investigation. Oh my gosh. This is wonderful. It's vindication for all of these sorts of things. And on top of that, now we have more information. First of all, the documents that Tucker Carlson was talking about yesterday, turns out they were on a USB drive. So we already know there were digital copies. I mean, they were just sending the digital copies over physically. I don't know exactly why they were doing that. It might be a scenario where sending it over the internet wouldn't be as secure, and I'm sure that's the reason. I mean, I'm not really a huge journalist, investigative journalist type person, at least not at this point. But and it's interesting because they just found it lying on the floor. And it seems as though the UPS doesn't, which, by the way, now we know is the company that they were using to send the package through. Apparently they have no answers. They just found it on the floor. Apparently they don't have security cameras, which is really silly. But yeah, this is a strange story. I mean, we also know now that Tucker Carlson is in fact still looking at the documents and such, and they're still waiting on actually releasing them. I don't know when they're going to release them. I'm sure it will be in the next few days, but, they're looking into it. And this is just a very fascinating story. I mean, especially since the USB stick was found, I imagine that either the person who stole it realized that it was going to be a big stink. Who knows what it is? Like, who knows what what was going on here? It might be a scenario where where an employee just stole a USB stick because why not? It might also be a scenario where there's a political operation going on. Who knows? We still don't know at this point. It's still kind of early in the story, but it's very interesting. To go on from this, and to a story which infuriates me to no end, NBC News has tried to impugn the credibility of all of the Hunter Biden stuff and all of the Joe Biden corruption stuff with a dossier from 2 months ago, which was written under a pseudonym and a fake identity, which we don't even know is fake. I mean, we know the identity's fake. We don't know the dossier is fake, and this is a dossier which I've not even heard of. And this article, look at it in the description. It is archived, so you're not giving them any clicks. But, and really, they don't deserve clicks for this story. It's awful. It's an awful story. I mean, they talk about how, there's this document that was circulating conservative circles, or they call them far-right circles, but then say, like, Newt Gingrich was sharing it around. It was circling far-right circles 2 months ago, and then they go on to claim it was the basis of the laptop story and the China story, which it's not. I mean, the information that's given here has nothing to do with the China Biden corruption. I mean, a lot of that's coming from Tony Bobolinsky, and those types. I mean, it's that 2017 email, which comes from the laptop, not this dossier, but they kind of try to imply that it did come from this dossier, which we know it didn't. It's just a mess. I mean, on top of that, they know that the China Biden corruption allegations aren't even based really in anything that came out this year. I mean, this dossier from 2 months ago, I didn't even know existed until today. Literally until this story came out, I didn't know it existed. And they try to claim that the laptop is less credible because this person was using a pseudonym. They don't even really, here's the thing, they don't even really make any claims about how the dossier is technically wrong. They don't say that anything is false, or that this has been proven false, or this has been proven false. No, all they say is that it was under a pseudonym, which is silly. But beyond that, the basis of the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden corruption allegations, particularly in China, don't come from anything that released this year. In fact, NBC News was talking about this more than a year ago, where they talk about Biden's trip to China with his son in 2013, where at the same time Hunter was trying to create a private equity firm in China. That looks corrupt. Now, they talked about this in an article from a year ago. They know that this dossier, which released 2 months ago, which I didn't even know existed until today, was not the basis for this story. Or it was not the basis for Biden-China corruption. They knew this existed. They wrote about it. This is just such a massive level of dishonesty, and they're really, really trying hard to protect Joe Biden, because here's the fact of the matter. The Hunter Biden story, other than the lewd and the crack pipe stuff, it's not about Hunter Biden, all right? Hunter Biden isn't really the problem with a lot of these stories about China corruption or Ukraine corruption. It's Joe Biden. It's the fact that Joe Biden was running around essentially playing cover man for his son and his corrupt dealings. It's the fact that he was playing cover man for Burisma, unknowingly or knowingly, seemingly knowingly at this point, as we've seen from certain documents and certain people talking about it, who would know. It's completely ridiculous. It's a completely ridiculous refutation. People are going to keep using it, despite the fact that it isn't even a refutation of the document. It's just a refutation of, oh, it wasn't this person who they said it was, that was a pseudonym. But lots of intelligence dossiers are written under pseudonyms. A lot of them don't even give you that much. A lot of them are just anonymous, entirely anonymous. Remember the whistleblower from back in December or something, last year? That guy was anonymous until we found out his name, and then everyone got banned who said it. You know, this is just what keeps on happening. It's not new to write something under a pseudonym. They do talk about things like the fact that it was originally posted by a anti-CCP Hong Kong tabloid. Of course, saying a newspaper is a tabloid in a formal newspaper context, like if a newspaper calls another newspaper a tabloid, what they're doing is they're trying to impugn their credibility. But what they're actually referring to is the fact that the format they are using is the tabloid format, which, by the way, is actually where the term comes from. The term comes from a different format of newspaper than the normal, New York Times type long paper, folded up, that sort of thing. Instead, it's more of a magazine type format. It's a lot smaller. It's called a tabloid. And it is used in a lot of cases for sort of sensational articles. But the thing is, when it's being referenced in an article, it's technically a reference to the actual format of the paper, not the credibility of the paper, but they use it to impugn the credibility. It's a very dishonest tactic. And you shouldn't trust anyone who does that sort of thing, who plays with these sort of word games where they aren't making their definitions clear intentionally in order to deceive the audience. It's, these articles are complete messes. Both of these articles are complete messes. Just don't trust these things. But anyway, on to our next story, and this is from Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, talking about how there wouldn't be targeted pandemic relief. It's not going to happen. And essentially, he says the reason this isn't going to happen is because of Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, Nancy Pelosi not taking that compromise deal from the Republicans in the past week was a really, really bad move. It was really bad. That was a disaster area, because it makes it extremely clear when the Republicans are compromising, but Democrats refuse to compromise, that the Republicans aren't the ones playing politics. They aren't the ones trying to get everything they want and nothing else. It's clearly just the Democrats. And so it makes Nancy Pelosi look like a very shrewd, not shrewd, but instead corrupt and unlikable politician, which she is. She's a very unlikable person. I mean, she's just very unlikable in a lot of ways. And it's just not working out for her. Like a lot of her political maneuverings over the past year and a half, it's been a nightmare for her speakership of the House. It's not worked at any level. I mean, you can go back to places like the whole controversy with regard to whether she was going to side with the squad, and then at first she's trying to be like antagonistic to the squad, not doing what they want, but then later when Trump says, yeah, don't let them do what they want, she lets them do what they want. She's been the quintessential resistance type Democrat. It's kind of fascinating to see how she represents exactly what, the Twitter Democrat person who's not, like an Antifa socialist type is. It's fascinating. It's truly fascinating how this sort of replicates itself in other places. Anyway, on to our next story. Walmart has now pulled all guns and ammo from store shelves, which isn't really a big deal for any gun lovers out there, because they were only selling 22 LRs and like bolt action guns anyway. They specifically didn't sell any useful calibers for they didn't sell 9mm, they didn't sell 5.56, they didn't sell anything like that. I mean, they're now pulling everything else off of store shelves. The reason being, they're saying, oh, it's because of economic strife. No, it's because no one ever buys their guns. I mean, there are so many other better places to get guns. Don't buy a Walmart gun. I mean, it's just a ploy, I think. I think it's just an excuse. I mean, they just weren't selling, So there wasn't a point anymore after they started taking off everything else. So yeah, it's kind of a nothing story, but I found it interesting at the very least. But anyway, on to our next story, and the next two stories, where we're going to be talking about more censorship, and these are more and more blatant. I mean, they still haven't given up. For instance, this next story, Facebook admits technical problems to block some political ads because it was always technical problems. They still haven't given up this excuse, which I'm kind of surprised about at this point, because they become a lot more adamant about being, the sort of arbiters of truth and right in a social media context. But, they're still holding on to this idea that, every time that we try to ban PewDiePie from search results, or when we try to shadow ban people or whatever, or we suspend a particular account, or, in this case, ban political ads. No, it was just technical issues. All the technical issues go one way, but, that's a technical issue. And see, this is why we need to sue these companies. I mean, and it's looking more and more like that's what's going to happen in the next few months. I mean, Clarence Thomas has already signaled that he wants to change how Section 230 is interpreted based on the lower courts. I don't think the Supreme Court has ever really talked about Section 230 at all, so that would be interesting, and that would also be very important, especially now that we have a 5-4 majority. No, I don't count Roberts in the Supreme Court. So that's really good, but once again, that's not even the only thing where we have problems with censorship. This time from Twitter, we have the Custom and Border Patrol chief's account being locked after he tweeted that a border wall would keep out gang members, murderers, and sexual predators. Things which are accurate of walls. I mean, walls are obviously not completely foolproof. I mean, you still have to have other sorts of things, patrols, that sort of stuff. But it's helpful because what people I don't think get about walls is that a wall is not designed to be impenetrable. What it's designed to do, because that's impossible. What it's designed to do is slow someone down. Because if you don't have the sort of time that it requires to, like saw off a part of the wall in order to get through, or, do some sort of thing necessary, dig under, or whatever, that sort of thing, or climb up it, all those things take time as opposed to just walking through the wall, or walking through the border without a wall there. And what that does is it gives people who are patrolling much more time to then scan and see that someone is trying to get over the wall, or trying to get through the wall, or trying to go under the wall. All of these sorts of things are much more obvious, and since they take more time, it will end up being a much more difficult process to actually cross the border illegally. And this is what a lot of people miss. I mean, Twitter is probably the most egregious when it comes to big tech censorship, and this is just another example of such. They've pretty much dropped all pretenses with regard to, it's just a technical glitch at this point. At this point, they're blatantly not only banning people for doing really mundane things, but they're also now fact-checking posts, literally editing posts themselves and putting out their own message. And I think even if there wasn't a way to attack them on them banning people, that at least you could attack someone for defamation through that. Because this goes for all sorts of fact-checking things. Because what that is Facebook or Twitter or any of these sorts of social media platforms take these few outlets. They decide on these outlets that they then use as their fact-checking outlets. They specifically choose them. So when they post a fact-check, that is them endorsing that fact-check. So if that fact-check is libelous or slander, or essentially if it's just defamatory, then they will be liable to be sued, even with Section 230 protections, because they're not acting as a platform in that instance, because it's not interactive content. It is them designing particular outlets that they want to be fact-checkers. So there's not even an argument there for 230 in the first place. I mean, but that might not be the most effective attack necessarily, because it wouldn't change a lot of what 230, what the problems with 230 are, and that is its overbroad application. And whenever we talk about 230, I always like to preface that I don't want more regulation, because here's the fact of the matter. Social media platforms as they exist right now have special liability protections from suits like libel, slander, or other such suits that can come from people saying things or posting things on their site, things like copyright and such. Now, this hasn't always worked, because Viacom sued YouTube back in like 2010 or something, because of a bunch of stuff that was put up on their platform, and it didn't even really work. I mean, they settled out of court. They ended up settling out of court, and what it ended up doing is creating the YouTube copyright system as it exists today. As well, it ended up creating, which, by the way, ended up being the precursor to the community guidelines system. So I think a lot of the problems with regard to big tech censorship and that sort of thing really started around 2010 with that Viacom lawsuit, because it became clear that if someone was determined enough, they could still take you to court for things which you have special legal liability protections from. And I think that sort of lawsuit needs to be done again, except you need to make it clear that what Section 230 really means. I mean, you need to be able to challenge someone's legal liability protection if they aren't acting in good faith, or if they're going outside of the bounds of what is reasonable to actually be able to moderate. Things like obscene things. My position, essentially, with regard to public platforms, social media, and the like, is that essentially what I think you should be able to censor, it should be very similar to a school, or similar to any sort of public space, where we can regulate certain levels of speech. We can regulate, for instance, you can't walk around nude in a park. That's not something you can do. That's something that the government is allowed to actually stop you from doing on federal or state or local land. As well, they can prevent you from, bringing certain things into public schools or things like that. Those are the sorts of things that platforms should be able to prevent from going on their platforms, because that's just being on an equal footing with the public lands. And we should have a standard set up to where if you reach this standard of you're not moderating, over moderating, you aren't removing people based on, based on their political ideology or something like that, then you're fine. And I think you should be able to, there should be actually a suit. There should be a way to sue someone for removing you from a public platform because of your ideology. And that should be able to be sparsed out within the context of a civil court. I think it's necessary, actually, because we don't really need more laws with regard to social media. Frankly, I think we have enough, maybe too much. What we need is to change the laws that are already there. And we need to open up an area to where you can sue someone for wrongfully terminating you from a platform, from a public platform, from something that, is ostensibly supposed to be just an equal arbiter of, information. You're essentially just supposed to say, go do what you want. But if you aren't doing that, you should be able to be sued by those people who you're wronging. I think that's where we need to go with this. I think that's the solution we need to have. We just need to be able to sue them for wrongfully terminating us. That's it. So, yeah, that's all. I mean, that's where I'm going to leave you today. I'm Kel Kidman. Subscribe for more. This has been Breaking on the Daily. I'm out.